It's 5:30 a.m. The alarm screams like a banshee in the darkness. Your body begs for 5 more minutes, maybe 10. The warm cocoon of your bed whispers sweet promises of comfort and safety. But somewhere in a place where legends are forged, a Navy SEAL instructor is bellowing at young warriors. If you want to change the world, start by making your bed. What if I told you that the difference between extraordinary success and mediocre failure isn't talent, luck, or even hard work? What if the secret to conquering your biggest dreams, overcoming your deepest fears, and transforming your entire life could be found in something so simple, so ordinary, that you probably did it this morning without thinking twice? Admiral William H. McRaven commanded some of the most dangerous military operations in modern history. He's the man behind the mission that took down Osama bin Laden. He's stared death in the face more times than most people have had hot dinners. And yet, when asked to share the most important lesson for changing the world, he didn't talk about strategy, weapons, or warfare. He talked about making your bed. Welcome to Mind's Quotes, where we dive deep into the wisdom that shapes extraordinary lives. I'm your host, and today we're unpacking one of the most powerful books ever written about turning small actions into life-changing results. This isn't just another self-help book. This is a blueprint for building unshakable discipline, unstoppable momentum, and unbreakable character. By the end of this audiobook summary, you will discover why Navy SEALs swear by a morning routine that takes 30 seconds, how a single decision can trigger an avalanche of success, and most importantly, how you can start changing your world today, literally before you leave your bedroom. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. If you're looking for quick fixes or magic pills, click away now. What we're about to explore requires something rare in our instant gratification world: the courage to start small and stay consistent. Are you ready for that kind of challenge? If you're still here, you're already different. You're already taking the first step towards something extraordinary. So hit that subscribe button, because you're part of a community that believes in the power of disciplined action. And trust me, by the time we reach the end of this journey together, you'll never look at your unmade bed the same way again. Let's begin. Author background. Before we dive into the life-changing lessons of Make Your Bed, you need to understand the man behind these words. Because when Admiral William H. McRaven speaks about discipline, failure, and perseverance, he's not speaking from a boardroom or a university lecture hall. He's speaking from the trenches of human experience. William Harry McRaven was born in 1955 in North Carolina, but his journey to becoming one of America's most respected military leaders began with what he calls an unremarkable childhood. He wasn't the strongest kid, the smartest kid, or the most naturally gifted. He was, by his own admission, pretty ordinary. And that's exactly what makes his story so powerful. After graduating from the University of Texas, McRaven made a decision that would define the next 4 decades of his life. He chose to become a Navy SEAL. Not because it was easy, quite the opposite. He chose it because it was impossibly hard. For those who don't know, Navy SEAL training has a dropout rate of over 75%. It's designed to break you, to find your absolute limit, and then push you beyond it. The training is so brutal that grown men have been known to ring a bell, literally ring a bell, to quit and escape the suffering. McRaven didn't ring the bell. Over his 37-year military career, he rose through the ranks to become a 4-star admiral and the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command. But here's what most people don't know. He commanded the operation that captured Saddam Hussein. He oversaw the mission that rescued Captain Richard Phillips from Somali pirates. And yes, he was the man who looked President Obama in the eye and said, "We're ready," before authorizing the raid that eliminated Osama bin Laden. But perhaps his most famous moment came not in a war zone or a situation room, but on a sunny day in Austin, Texas, at the University of Texas commencement ceremony in 2014. Standing before 8,000 graduates, this battle-hardened admiral delivered a speech that would eventually be viewed by over 10 million people on YouTube. The speech was simple, profound, and centered around 10 life lessons he'd learned during Navy SEAL training. The first lesson? Make your bed every morning. The audience initially chuckled. Here was a man who had planned some of the most complex military operations in history, and he was talking about bed sheets and hospital corners. But as he continued speaking, something magical happened. The graduates, and eventually millions of viewers, began to understand that this wasn't about beds at all. It was about the profound power of small, disciplined actions to create extraordinary results. The speech was so powerful that McRaven expanded it into the book we're exploring today. Make Your Bed. Little things that can change your life, and maybe the world, became a New York Times bestseller. Not because it promised easy answers, but because it delivered hard truths wrapped in hope. This isn't a book written by a motivational speaker or a business guru. This is wisdom forged in the crucible of the world's most demanding training programs, tested in life-or-death situations, and proven in the highest-stakes environments imaginable. When Admiral McRaven tells you to make your bed, he's sharing a secret that has been battle-tested by the world's most elite warriors. And now, it's time for you to discover why this simple act has the power to change everything. Lesson 1. Start your day with a task completed. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another and another. These aren't just words. They're the foundation of philosophy that has transformed millions of lives. But to truly understand the power of this first lesson, let me take you inside the world of Navy SEAL training, to a place where making your bed isn't just a chore, it's a matter of survival. Imagine you're 22 years old, and you just arrived at the basic underwater demolition/SEAL training compound in Coronado, California. You've left behind everything comfortable and familiar for a chance to join the most elite military unit in the world. The instructors don't care about your college degree, your athletic achievements, or your good intentions. They care about one thing. Can you do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, especially when you don't feel like doing it? Every morning at 5:30 a.m., before the physical torture begins, before the mental challenges, before the ice-cold Pacific Ocean tries to steal your breath away, there's an inspection. Your bed must be made to perfection. The corners must be tight enough to bounce a quarter off. The blanket must be stretched so taut you could use it as a drum. Every wrinkle, every imperfection, every sign of carelessness is noted and punished. The instructors aren't trying to turn you into housekeepers. They're trying to teach you something far more valuable, the discipline of small excellence. Here's what McRaven discovered during his own SEAL training, and what he's taught thousands of others. How you do anything is how you do everything. The same attention to detail that goes into making your bed will show up when you're planning a complex military operation. The same discipline that gets you out of bed at 5:30 a.m. will carry you through the hardest moments of your life. But there's something even deeper happening here. When you make your bed every morning, you're not just organizing fabric and pillows. You're making a declaration. You're telling the universe, and more importantly, you're telling yourself that you are someone who finishes what they start, no matter how small. Think about your typical morning. How many people wake up and immediately check their phones? How many people stumble to the coffee maker, scroll through social media, or dive straight into emails? They start their day reacting instead of acting. They begin from a place of deficit instead of accomplishment. But when you make your bed, something different happens. You start your day by completing a mission. You begin with a win, and that win, small as it might seem, creates momentum. McRaven tells the story of a young SEAL trainee who was struggling with the more challenging aspects of training. This young man was failing swim tests, struggling with obstacle courses, and seriously considering ringing the bell to quit. But he never failed bed inspection. Not once. Every morning his bed was perfect. One day, an instructor pulled him aside and said, "You know why you haven't quit yet? Because you know how to finish something. Every morning, you prove to yourself that you can do what needs to be done. That's the same strength that's going to get you through this training." The young man graduated and went on to serve with distinction in multiple combat deployments. But here's what's truly beautiful about this principle. It works for everyone, not just Navy SEALs. Consider Sarah, a single mother working 2 jobs while pursuing her nursing degree. Every morning felt like drowning. Kids to get ready, bills to worry about, assignments due, shifts to work. She felt overwhelmed before her feet hit the floor. Then she read McRaven's book and decided to try making her bed every morning. Just that. Nothing else changed initially. But something remarkable happened. That first small win gave her the confidence to tackle the next challenge, and the next. The pride from completing one task perfectly spilled over into other areas of her life. Her study habits improved. Her work performance enhanced. Her relationship with her children became more patient and intentional. 2 years later, she graduated nursing school with honors and landed her dream job at Children's Hospital. When asked about the turning point, she said, "It sounds crazy, but it started with making my bed. When I proved to myself I could do one thing with excellence, I began to believe I could do anything with excellence." This is the secret that high achievers have known for centuries. Benjamin Franklin talked about starting each day with a question: what good shall I do today? Olympic athletes follow precise morning routines. Successful entrepreneurs swear by morning rituals that set the tone for peak performance. They understand that momentum is everything. And momentum begins with the first domino. Your bed is that first domino. When you make your bed, you're not just straightening sheets. You're building character. You're developing discipline. You're creating a foundation of small excellence that will support the weight of your biggest dreams. But here's the challenge, and McRaven is brutally honest about this. Making your bed won't feel magical at first. It won't solve your problems or instantly transform your life. For the first few days, maybe even weeks, it will feel like just another chore. That's the test. Anyone can make their bed when they feel motivated. But can you make it when you're running late? Can you make it when you're sick? Can you make it when you've had the worst day of your life? That's where the real transformation happens. In those moments when you don't feel like it, but you do it anyway, you're building the most valuable muscle in the human body, your discipline muscle. And once that muscle gets strong enough, there's no limit to what you can accomplish. Lesson 2, you can't go it alone. If you want to change the world, find someone to help you paddle. In a world that glorifies the lone wolf, the self-made success story, and rugged individualism, Admiral McRaven delivers a truth that might surprise you. The strongest people in the world know they can't do it alone. This lesson comes from one of the most grueling exercises in Navy SEAL training: surf passage. Imagine yourself in a small rubber boat with 7 other trainees, paddling through massive Pacific swells, trying to navigate crushing waves that can flip your boat in an instant. The instructors aren't just testing your physical strength. They're testing something far more critical: your ability to work as a team when failure means everyone suffers. McRaven shares a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. During his own training, his boat crew was consistently finishing last in these paddling exercises. They were getting extra punishment, extra training, extra pain. The crew was demoralized, frustrated, and ready to turn on each other. Then something changed. Instead of 8 individuals trying to paddle, they became one unit. They learned to read each other's movements, to anticipate needs, to cover weaknesses with strengths. The smallest guy couldn't paddle as hard, so the stronger members picked up his slack. The tired member got encouragement and support from those who had energy. They stopped competing with each other and started competing as a team. The result? They went from last place to first place almost overnight. But this lesson extends far beyond military training or extreme sports. In every area of life, the most successful people understand a fundamental truth: multiplication happens through collaboration, not isolation. Consider the story of Lisa, an ambitious software engineer who dreamed of starting her own tech company. For 2 years, she worked alone in her apartment, coding day and night, convinced that she needed to build everything herself to maintain control and save money. She burned through her savings, battled loneliness, and watched her health deteriorate as she tried to be the designer, programmer, marketer, and business strategist all at once. Her breakthrough came when she finally admitted she needed help. She found a co-founder who excelled at business development while she focused on product development. She hired a part-time designer who could create in hours what would take her weeks. She joined an entrepreneur meetup group where experienced founders mentored newcomers. Within 6 months of embracing collaboration, she secured her first major client. Within a year, she had raised seed funding. Within 2 years, her company had grown to 25 employees and was profitable. I spent 2 years trying to prove I could do everything, Lisa reflects. I spent 6 months learning that I could do anything with the right team, This is a paradox that McRaven discovered. True strength comes from admitting weakness. Real independence comes from embracing interdependence. Genuine leadership emerges when you elevate others to elevate yourself. Think about the greatest achievements in human history. Did one person put a man on the moon? Did one person build the internet? Did one person cure polio? Of course not. Every monumental accomplishment has been the result of teams, collaborations, and people who understood that their individual gifts were amplified when combined with others. But here's where most people get stuck. They confuse asking for help with being weak. They think that needing others means they're not capable, not smart enough, not strong enough. McRaven destroys this myth with a simple observation from SEAL training. The biggest, strongest guys often failed, while smaller, weaker individuals who knew how to work with others succeeded. Physical strength is individual. Mental toughness is individual. But mission success is always collective. Consider Michael, a struggling musician who spent years playing alone in coffee shops, posting videos online, and wondering why his career wasn't taking off. He was talented, dedicated, and hard-working. He was also isolated, stubborn, and convinced that real artists don't need help. Everything changed when he met Jennifer, a songwriter who was terrible at performing but brilliant at crafting lyrics. Then came David, a producer who understood the technical side of music creation. Soon, Sarah joined as a manager who knew how to navigate the business side of the industry. Michael thought adding team members would dilute his vision and reduce his control. Instead, it amplified his strengths and covered his weaknesses. His natural performance ability was enhanced by Jennifer's storytelling, refined by David's production skills, and strategically promoted by Sarah's business acumen. 2 years later, their first album went gold. Michael still gets top billing, but he's the first to admit that without his boat crew, he'd still be playing for tips at local venues. The lesson here isn't about finding people to do your work for you. It's about finding people who complement your abilities and share your vision. McRaven emphasizes that the best boat crews weren't made up of identical people. They were made up of people with different strengths who learned to paddle in sync. In your life, this might mean finding an accountability partner who keeps you honest about your goals, joining a mastermind group of people pursuing similar dreams, hiring experts in areas where you're weak, building mentoring relationships with people who've walked your path, creating a support network that celebrates your wins and helps you through losses. But there's an even deeper layer to this lesson. When McRaven talks about finding someone to help you paddle, he's not just talking about practical assistance. He's talking about the psychological and emotional support that comes from shared struggle. During the hardest moments of SEAL training, when your body is broken, your mind is exhausted, and your spirit is crushed, it's not individual willpower that gets you through. It's the knowledge that your boat crew is counting on you. It's the commitment you've made to people who have committed to you. It's the understanding that if you quit, you're not just hurting yourself, you're abandoning the team. This is why people who exercise with partners stick to their routines longer than those who exercise alone. It's why study groups often outperform individual students. It's why businesses started by teams have higher survival rates than those started by solo founders. The person sitting next to you in that metaphorical boat isn't just helping you reach your destination faster. They're giving you a reason to keep paddling when everything inside you wants to stop. So here's your challenge. Look at the biggest goal you're pursuing right now. Ask yourself honestly, am I trying to do this alone? If the answer is yes, you're making it harder than it needs to be. Find your boat crew. Find people who share your vision but bring different strengths. Find mentors who've navigated these waters before. Find peers who are fighting similar battles. Find accountability partners who will call you out when you're not giving your best effort. Because the truth is, you're capable of incredible things. But you're capable of extraordinary things when you combine your capabilities with others who believe in the same mission. Remember, asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom. And wisdom is what separates those who dream about changing the world from those who actually do it. Lesson 3. Only the size of your heart matters. If you want to change a world, measure a person by the size of their heart, not the size of their flippers. In a training program designed to push human limits, Where physical strength often determines who survives and who rings the bell, Admiral McRaven learned something that would fundamentally change how he viewed human potential. Sometimes, the smallest person in the room has the biggest impact. Let me paint you a picture that will stay with you forever. During surf passage training, each boat crew paddles through massive ocean swells while instructors time their performance. The fastest crews get rewarded with rest and warm food. The slowest crews get punished with extra training and cold meals. It's a simple system designed to motivate peak performance. Week after week, one boat crew consistently finished first. Week after week, they dominated every water exercise. They were faster, stronger, and more coordinated than any other crew. But here's what made this crew legendary. It was led by a man who was barely 5 feet tall. His name was Mark. He had the smallest flippers in class, which should have been a massive disadvantage in water exercises. He couldn't bench press as much as the bigger guys. He didn't have the wingspan for powerful swimming strokes. By every physical measure that seemed to matter, he should have been holding his crew back. Instead, he was propelling them forward. How? Mark understood something that his bigger, stronger competitors missed. Leadership isn't about personal dominance. It's about team elevation. While other boat crew leaders were focused on showcasing their individual strength, Mark was focused on maximizing collective performance. He studied ocean patterns to find the most efficient routes through the waves. He observed his crew members to understand their individual strengths and weaknesses. He provided encouragement when they were tired, strategy when they were confused, and inspiration when they wanted to quit. Most importantly, he never let his physical limitations become mental limitations. He couldn't paddle harder than everyone else, so he taught everyone to paddle smarter. He couldn't swim faster than everyone else, so he helped everyone swim more efficiently. The result? His crew didn't just win water exercises. They shattered records. They became the standard that every other crew aspired to reach. And they did it following a leader who, by conventional measures, should have been the weakest link. This is what McRaven means when he talks about the size of your heart mattering more than the size of your flippers. Heart isn't just about courage, though courage is essential. Heart is about the capacity to care more about collective success than personal recognition. Heart is about finding ways to contribute when traditional methods aren't available. Heart is about refusing to let limitations define possibilities. Consider the story of Elena, a 28-year-old who dreamed of becoming a professional speaker despite having a severe stutter. In a field that seems to reward smooth talkers and polished presenters, her speech impediment appeared to be an insurmountable obstacle. For years, Elena watched other speakers command stages with effortless eloquence while she struggled to order coffee without embarrassment. She could have accepted that speaking wasn't for her. She could have chosen a different path. She could have let her small flippers keep her out of the water entirely. Instead, she decided to measure herself by the size of her heart, not the fluency of her speech. Elena began studying not just public speaking techniques, but the deeper aspects of human communication. She learned that audiences don't just want smooth delivery, they want authentic connection. She discovered that vulnerability often creates more powerful bonds than perfection. She realized that her stutter, rather than being a weakness to hide, could become a strength to leverage. Elena developed a speaking style that was raw, honest, and deeply moving. She talked about overcoming obstacles, finding strength in vulnerability, and refusing to let limitations define destiny. Her stutter became part of her message, not despite it, but because of it. Today, Elena is one of the most sought-after speakers in the personal development industry. She commands higher fees than many smoother speakers because audiences know that when Elena talks about overcoming challenges, she's not speaking from theory. She's speaking from lived experience. Her heart was bigger than her limitations. This principle extends far beyond physical attributes or speaking abilities. In every field, in every endeavor, there are people who succeed not because they have the biggest advantages, but because they have the biggest commitment to excellence. Think about the teacher with average credentials who becomes legendary because she cares more about student success than curriculum requirements. The salesperson who lacks natural charisma but outsells everyone because he truly believes his product will help people. The athlete who isn't the fastest or strongest but becomes captain because she elevates everyone around her. The employee who doesn't have the most impressive resume but gets promoted because she approaches every task with exceptional care and attention. McRaven's insight here is revolutionary because it challenges our society's obsession with natural talent and genetic gifts. We live in a world that celebrates the naturally gifted, the genetically blessed, the inherently advantaged. But SEAL training proves something different. Natural gifts can take you far, but heart can take you anywhere. The instructors weren't looking for perfect physical specimens. They could find those anywhere. They were looking for people who would refuse to quit when quitting made sense. They were looking for people who would carry a wounded teammate when their own body was broken. They were looking for people who would find a way to complete the mission, even when the conventional way was impossible. They were looking for people with big hearts. Here's what this means for your life. Stop measuring yourself by metrics that don't matter. Stop comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. Stop letting perceived disadvantages become actual limitations. Instead, ask yourself these questions. How much do I care about what I'm pursuing? How willing am I to find unconventional solutions to conventional problems? How committed am I to helping others succeed, not just myself? How persistent will I be when the easy path is blocked? Your heart, your capacity to care, to persist, to innovate, to serve, is infinitely expandable. Unlike physical attributes or natural talents, it's something you can develop regardless of your starting point. The smallest person in the room can cast the biggest shadow if their heart is big enough to fill the space. Mark, the 5-foot-tall SEAL with the smallest flippers, went on to serve in multiple combat deployments. He saved lives, completed impossible missions, and earned decorations for valor, not because he was the biggest or strongest, but because when it mattered most, he had the biggest heart. Elena, the stuttering speaker, has now inspired hundreds of thousands of people to overcome their own limitations, not because she had perfect delivery, but because she had perfect commitment to her message. You have something to offer that no one else can provide. You have a unique combination of experiences, perspectives, and capabilities that the world needs. Don't let superficial measurements convince you otherwise. Your flippers might be small, but if your heart is big enough, you'll not only stay afloat, you'll help others learn to swim. And that's how you change the world. Lesson 4, life's not fair. Drive on. If you want to change the world, get over being a sugar cookie and keep moving forward. Of all the lessons Admiral McRaven shares, this might be the hardest to swallow and the most important to master. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that every successful person eventually learns. Life doesn't care about your efforts, your intentions, or your sense of fairness. But how you respond to that unfairness will determine everything. Let me take you to one of the most psychologically brutal exercises in SEAL training. The uniform inspection. Every day, trainees spend hours preparing their uniforms to absolute perfection. Every button polished to a mirror shine. Every crease pressed to surgical precision. Every detail examined and re-examined until it meets impossible standards. Then they stand at attention while instructors examine their work with magnifying glass intensity, looking for any excuse to find fault. Here's the twist that broke many trainees. Sometimes, no matter how perfect your uniform was, the instructors would find you lacking. They would dump sand on your perfectly pressed clothes, call you a sugar cookie, and send you into the cold Pacific Ocean fully clothed. Then, soaking wet and covered in sand, you are to spend the rest of the day in wet, gritty clothes while others who truly did have substandard uniforms stayed dry and comfortable. The lesson? Life isn't fair. And the sooner you accept that reality, the sooner you can focus on what actually matters, your response to unfairness. McRaven watched trainees react to this injustice in 2 distinct ways. Some became bitter, angry, and demoralized. They spent their energy complaining about the unfairness, questioning the system, and allowing resentment to poison their performance. Many of these trainees eventually quit. Others, the ones who will become SEALs, learned to shrug off the unfairness and focus on the mission. They realized that the ocean didn't care about their comfort, enemy bullets didn't care about fairness, and mission success didn't depend on everything going according to plan. This lesson isn't just about military training. It's about every major challenge you'll face in life. Consider Sarah, a brilliant marketing executive who worked for 3 years on a revolutionary campaign that would have transformed her company's brand and potentially generated millions in revenue. She researched, strategized, and crafted presentations that were nothing short of genius. The week before her big presentation to the board, her supervisor took credit for the entire project and presented it as his own idea. Sarah was not only denied recognition, but was actually criticized for not contributing enough to the team effort. Sarah had a choice. She could spend her energy fighting the injustice, documenting the theft, rallying colleagues to support her version of events. She could become bitter about corporate politics and unfair supervisors. She could let this experience poison her attitude and derail her career. Or she could recognize that life isn't fair and drive on. Sarah chose to drive on. She quietly documented her work for future reference. But more importantly, she immediately began developing an even better campaign. 6 months later, when that campaign succeeded beyond all expectations, she was recruited by a competing firm at a 40% salary increase and a VP title. The unfairness taught me something valuable, Sarah reflects. I learned that my worth isn't determined by recognition from others. I learned that my best revenge against unfairness is excellence that can't be ignored. Most importantly, I learned that energy spent on anger is energy not spent on advancement. This is the mindset that separates those who succeed despite obstacles from those who let obstacles define their limitations. But McRaven's lesson goes deeper than just accepting unfairness. It's about understanding that unfairness can actually become your competitive advantage if you respond to it correctly. Think about Marcus, a talented software developer who was passed over for promotion 3 times despite having the best performance metrics in his department. Each time, the promotion went to someone with better connections, better presentation skills, or better political instincts. Marcus could have become cynical about meritocracy and corporate advancement. Instead, he became curious about what he could learn from these experiences. He realized that technical skills, while necessary, weren't sufficient for leadership roles. So he enrolled in presentation courses. He studied organizational psychology. He volunteered for cross-functional projects that would expand his network and demonstrate his leadership potential. When the 4th promotion opportunity arose, Marcus didn't just get the job. He was a unanimous choice. All of his colleagues, including those who had been promoted before him, voted for his advancement. The unfairness he had experienced had forced him to develop skills he never would have acquired otherwise. Getting passed over was the best thing that happened to my career. Marcus says, "It made me better, stronger, and more well-rounded than I would have been if everything had gone according to my plan." This is a paradox of unfairness. It's often a catalyst that pushes us beyond our comfort zones and into our greatness. Consider the stories of some of the world's most successful people. Oprah Winfrey was born into poverty, suffered abuse, and faced discrimination, yet became one of the most influential media personalities in history. Stephen King's first novel was rejected 30 times before becoming a bestseller that launched his career. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team, but used that rejection as motivation to become the greatest player of all time. Colonel Sanders was rejected 1,009 times before someone agreed to buy his chicken recipe. None of these people succeeded because life was fair to them. They succeeded because they refused to let unfairness define their destiny. But here's the critical distinction that McRaven emphasizes. Accepting that life isn't fair doesn't mean accepting defeat. It doesn't mean being passive or resigned. It means acknowledging reality so you can respond strategically rather than emotionally. When you're treated unfairly, you have 3 choices. 1. Fight the unfairness directly. Sometimes this works, but often it consumes enormous energy with limited results. 2. Accept defeat. This guarantees that unfairness wins. 3. Use the unfairness as fuel. This transforms obstacles into opportunities. Choice 3 is what separates sugar cookies from seals. The sugar cookies get wet, get sandy, get uncomfortable, and then spend their day complaining about how unfair it all is. The future seals get wet, get sandy, get uncomfortable, and then use that discomfort to build resilience, mental toughness, and unshakable belief that they can succeed regardless of circumstances. Here's your challenge. Think about the biggest unfairness you're currently facing. Maybe it's a boss who doesn't appreciate your contributions. Maybe it's a health challenge that limits your options. Maybe it's financial circumstances that make your goals more difficult. Maybe it's people who have advantages you'll never have. Stop asking, why me? Start asking, what now? Stop focusing on what should be happening. Start focusing on what you can make happen despite what's not happening. Stop waiting for fair conditions. Start creating favorable outcomes under unfair conditions. Because here's what Admiral McRaven learned in the darkest moments of SEAL training and the most dangerous combat situations. The world doesn't owe you fairness, but it will respect your response to unfairness. Your response is where your power lies. Your response is where your character is revealed. Your response is where your future is determined. Life's not fair, but that's okay, because you're strong enough to succeed anyway. Drive on. Lesson 5. Failure can make you stronger. If you want to change the world, don't be afraid of the circus. In Navy SEAL training, failure isn't just an option, it's inevitable. And when you fail, you don't get a gentle correction or participation trophy. You get the circus, 2 hours of additional calisthenics designed to break your body and test your spirit. Sand fleas bite your sweating skin. Your muscles scream in agony. Other trainees get to rest while you suffer. Most people would do anything to avoid the circus. But Admiral McRaven discovered something that would revolutionize how he viewed failure. The strongest SEALs weren't the ones who never failed. They were the ones who failed the most and kept coming back. Let me tell you about Tommy, a trainee who seemed destined for failure from day one. He failed swim tests repeatedly. He couldn't meet the minimum standards for push-ups. His run times were consistently slow. Week after week, Tommy found himself doing the circus while his classmates rested. The instructors were brutal. Maybe you're not SEAL material, Tommy. Maybe you should consider a different career path. Maybe you should ring the bell and stop embarrassing yourself. Every night, Tommy would call his wife in tears, questioning whether he had what it took. Every morning, he would show up again, knowing he would likely face the circus again. His body was broken, his confidence was shattered, but something inside him refused to quit. Something extraordinary began to happen. The circus, which was designed to be punishment, began to make Tommy stronger. While other trainees were maintaining their fitness, Tommy was exceeding it. The extra training that was meant to break him was actually building him. By graduation, Tommy wasn't just keeping up with his classmates. He was outperforming them. His swim times went from worst in class to top 10%. His physical fitness scores went from failing to exceptional. But more importantly, his mental resilience was unbreakable. Years later, during a particularly dangerous mission in Afghanistan, Tommy's team was pinned down by enemy fire for over 6 hours. While other team members were reaching their physical and mental limits, Tommy seemed energized by the adversity. He had learned to thrive in impossible situations because he'd been forged in the circus of failure. The circus made me who I am, Tommy reflects. Every failure taught me that I could survive what I thought would break me. Every extra hour of punishment proved that my limits were illusions. I didn't avoid failure. I learned to dance with it. This is a mindset shift that changes everything. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the raw material of success. Consider the story of Jennifer, a young entrepreneur who launched her first startup with unlimited optimism and a revolutionary product idea. She had conducted market research, developed a business plan, and secured initial funding. Everything pointed to inevitable success. The startup failed spectacularly within 8 months. The product had fundamental design flaws that customers hated. The market research had been based on flawed assumptions. The business model was unsustainable. Jennifer lost her investment, disappointed her supporters, and had to move back in with her parents at age 29. She could have interpreted this failure as evidence that entrepreneurship wasn't for her. She could have played it safe with a traditional career path. She could have let one failure define her capabilities. Instead, Jennifer treated the failure as expensive education. She spent 6 months analyzing every mistake. She interviewed customers who had rejected her product to understand their real needs. She studied successful competitors to understand sustainable business models. She networked with other entrepreneurs who had failed and succeeded. Most importantly, she began to see failure differently. Instead of something to be avoided, It became information to be processed, instead of a verdict on her abilities. It became feedback on her approach. Her second startup succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. It was acquired by a Fortune 500 company for $50 million just 3 years after launch. But Jennifer credits her first failure as the foundation of her second success. "My first startup taught me everything my MBA didn't," she says. "It taught me that failure is feedback, not fate. It taught me that resilience is more valuable than resources. Most importantly, it taught me that the circus of failure is where champions are made." But here's what McRaven emphasizes. It's not enough to simply experience failure. The transformative power comes from how you process and respond to failure. The circus is only valuable if you learn from the circus. Consider two people who lose their jobs on the same day. Person A spends months feeling sorry for themselves, blaming the economy, their former employer, or bad luck. They apply for similar jobs half-heartedly and wonder why they can't get interviews. Person B treats the job loss as a forced opportunity for growth. They conduct honest self-assessment to understand their weaknesses. They develop new skills during their unemployment. They network strategically and explore career paths they had never considered. Same failure, completely different outcomes. Person B understands what Tommy and Jennifer learned. Failure is not a judgment. It's a teacher, and the lessons failure teaches are often more valuable than the lessons success provides. Success can make you complacent. Success can make you overconfident. Success can make you believe that your methods are perfect and your judgment is infallible. Failure keeps you humble. Failure keeps you learning. Failure keeps you improving. Think about the greatest innovations in human history. The Wright brothers failed in dozens of flying attempts before achieving flight. Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb. James Dyson created 5,126 prototypes before perfecting his revolutionary vacuum. Sarah Blakely was rejected by every manufacturer before creating Spanx and becoming a billionaire. None of these people succeeded despite failure. They succeeded because of failure. Each failure eliminated one approach that didn't work and brought them closer to the approach that would work. McRaven's insight from SEAL training is that failure builds what he calls scar tissue, the mental and emotional resilience that allows you to handle increasingly difficult challenges. Just like physical scar tissue is often stronger than the original skin, psychological scar tissue from failure makes you stronger than you were before. But here's the key. You have to stay in the circus long enough for the scar tissue to form. Most people experience failure and immediately look for the exit. They want the pain to stop, the embarrassment to end, the challenge to go away. They ring the bell and walk away from their circus. The people who change the world do the opposite. They lean into the failure. They stay in the circus. They allow the process to transform them. So here's your new relationship with failure. Welcome it. Study it. Learn from it. Use it as fuel. When you fail your next test, don't see inadequacy. See information about what to study differently. When your next project doesn't succeed, don't see incompetence. See intelligence about what to try differently. When your next relationship doesn't work out, don't see unworthiness. See wisdom about what you need differently. The circus of failure isn't where dreams go to die. It's where champions go to be born. Don't be afraid of the circus. Be afraid of a life so small that you never risk experiencing it. Because on the other side of that failure, on the other side of that circus, on the other side of that pain, is a version of yourself that you never could have become without it. Embrace the circus. It's making you stronger than you know. Lesson 6. You must dare to take risks. If you want to change the world, slide down the obstacle head first. In the brutal obstacle course of Navy SEAL training, there's a moment that separates the cautious and courageous, the safe from the successful. It's a towering rope obstacle that trainees must navigate to continue their training. Most approach it methodically, carefully, safely, feet first, testing each step, minimizing risk. But Admiral McRaven learned something that would define his entire philosophy of leadership and life. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is play it safe. Picture this obstacle. A 30-foot rope structure that sways in the ocean breeze, slick with moisture from the Pacific fog. The safe approach is to climb down slowly, Feet first, maintaining control and minimizing the chance of falling. It's logical. It's careful. It's also slow. The instructors weren't just measuring completion. They were measuring speed. And speed required risk. The fastest way down the obstacle was head first, in a controlled slide that required perfect balance, split-second timing, and absolute commitment. There was no halfway. You either committed fully to the slide, or you failed spectacularly. McRaven watched trainee after trainee choose safety over speed, caution over courage. They completed the obstacle, but they didn't excel. They survived the challenge, but they didn't dominate it. Then he watched the trainees who would become SEALs make a different choice. They chose controlled risk over comfortable safety. They slid down head first, shaving crucial seconds off their time, demonstrating the kind of calculated boldness that would serve them in combat situations where hesitation meant death. This wasn't recklessness, it was risk intelligence. The difference between the two would define everything. Let me tell you about Maria, a talented software engineer who worked for the same company for 8 years. She was comfortable, competent, and completely unfulfilled. Every day felt like a repeat of the day before. Her skills were stagnating. Her salary increases were minimal, and her sense of purpose was disappearing. Maria dreamed of starting her own consulting firm. She had the expertise, the connections, and the business acumen to succeed. But she also had a mortgage, car payments, and the psychological comfort of a steady paycheck. For 3 years, Maria talked about taking the leap. She researched the market, developed business plans, and calculated financial projections. But she never acted. She was climbing down the obstacle feet first, safe, careful, and slow. Then Maria's company announced layoffs. Her department was being eliminated, and her safe job was disappearing whether she chose to leave or not. She was about to be forced down the obstacle anyway, but now she had no control over the timing or the method. In that moment, Maria realized something profound. The biggest risk isn't taking risks. It's believing that avoiding risks will keep you safe. Maria made a decision that changed her life. Instead of frantically searching for another safe corporate job, she used her severance package as startup capital for her consulting firm. Instead of seeing the layoff as a catastrophe, she saw it as a universe pushing her toward the life she had been too afraid to choose. 18 months later, Maria's consulting firm had 6 employees and revenue that exceeded her former corporate salary by 200%. More importantly, she woke up every morning excited about the challenges ahead instead of dreading another day of unfulfilling routine. Getting laid off was the best thing that happened to my career. Maria reflects. It forced me to slide down the obstacle head first. I learned that the thing I was most afraid of, uncertainty, was actually the thing I needed most for growth. This is a paradox that McRaven discovered. In a rapidly changing world, the safe approach is often the riskiest approach. Playing it safe keeps you in your comfort zone, but comfort zones have an expiration date. Consider the industries that have been disrupted in the last 20 years. Taxi drivers who thought their jobs were safe until Uber arrived. Bookstore owners who thought physical retail was permanent until Amazon dominated. Hotel chains that thought their model was unbeatable until Airbnb emerged. Traditional media companies that thought their audience was guaranteed until Netflix changed everything. The people who survived these disruptions weren't the ones who played it safe. They were the ones who saw change coming and positioned themselves to benefit from it instead of being victimized by it. But taking risks doesn't mean being reckless. McRaven emphasizes the difference between intelligent risk-taking and foolish gambling. The SEAL trainees who slid down the obstacle head first had practiced the technique, calculated the odds, and developed the skills necessary to succeed. They weren't being careless. They were being strategic. Intelligent risk-taking involves preparation, developing the skills needed to handle increased challenges. Calculation, understanding the potential rewards and consequences. Timing, choosing when conditions favor bold action. Commitment, going all in once you decided to act. Consider David, a middle manager who recognized that artificial intelligence was going to transform his industry. He could have hoped that the changes would happen slowly enough for him to retire safely. Instead, he spent 2 years learning AI applications, attending conferences, and building expertise in machine learning. When his company announced an AI transformation initiative, David wasn't threatened by the change. he was positioned to lead it. His willingness to risk time and energy learning new skills paid off with promotion to VP of Digital Innovation and a 60% salary increase. Meanwhile, his colleagues who had played it safe by avoiding the risky new technology found themselves obsolete. The lesson here isn't about specific career moves or business decisions. It's about developing the mindset that embraces intelligent risk as a pathway to extraordinary results. Average people ask, "What if this doesn't work?" Exceptional people ask, "What if this does work?" Average people focus on what they might lose. Exceptional people focus on what they might gain. Average people wait for perfect conditions. Exceptional people create conditions through action. McRaven learned this lesson not just in training, but in some of the most dangerous military operations in modern history. The raid that eliminated Osama bin Laden was the ultimate example of intelligent risk-taking. The potential for failure was enormous. The consequences of failure would have been catastrophic, but the potential rewards for American security and global stability made the risk worth taking. The operation succeeded not because it was safe, but because it was carefully planned, expertly executed, and boldly committed to once the decision was made. Here's your challenge. Think about the biggest opportunity you're currently avoiding because it feels too risky. Ask yourself these questions. What skills can I develop to increase my chances of success? What's the worst-case scenario, and how would I recover from it? What's the best-case scenario, and how would it change my life? What's the cost of not taking this risk? Remember, you don't have to slide down every obstacle head first, but you need to be willing to slide down the obstacles that matter most. The life you want is on the other side of the risk you're afraid to take. The person you're meant to become is waiting for you to stop climbing down safely and start sliding down boldly. Don't let safety become your prison. Let intelligent risk-taking become your liberation. The obstacle is waiting. The choice is yours. Slide down head first. Lesson 7. Stand up to the bullies. If you want to change the world, stand up to the bullies. In the middle of Navy SEAL training, when trainees are already pushed beyond their physical and mental limits, there's a moment that has nothing to do with swimming, running, or completing obstacle courses. It's a moment that reveals character in its purest form. It's the moment when you realize that the biggest enemy isn't the training. It's the person next to you who's trying to tear you down. Admiral McRaven witnessed something that happens in every challenging environment. When pressure increases, some people rise to the occasion, while others try to drag everyone else down to their level. Let me paint you a picture that will make your blood boil and then inspire you to action. During Hell Week, the infamous 5.5 days of continuous training with a maximum of 4 hours of sleep, trainees are pushed to the absolute edge of human endurance. Bodies break down. Minds begin to fracture. Hallucinations become common. This is when characters are revealed and legends are born. In McRaven's class, there was a trainee, let's call him Richards, who had decided early on that he wasn't going to make it through training. But instead of quietly quitting, Richards made a different choice. He decided that if he was going down, he was taking as many people with him as possible. Richard became the bully. When other trainees were struggling with swim tests, Richards would whisper in their ears, "You're never going to make it. You might as well quit now and save yourself the embarrassment." When someone was having difficulty with an obstacle course, Richards would add psychological pressure. "Everyone can see you're the weak link. You're holding the whole class back." During the few precious minutes of rest, when trainees needed encouragement and camaraderie, Richards would spread doubt and fear. "Half of us are going to wash out anyway. Look around. You can see who's not going to make it." The instructors noticed Richards' behavior, but they didn't intervene. This wasn't a mistake or oversight. It was intentional. They knew that in combat situations, there would always be people who tried to undermine morale, spread defeatism, and sabotage team cohesion. They wanted to see how the class would handle internal toxicity. For weeks, Richards' psychological warfare continued. Some trainees began to internalize his negativity. Others started avoiding him, but didn't confront the behavior. The morale of the entire class began to deteriorate. Then something beautiful happened. A trainee named Peterson, not the biggest, not the strongest, not the most naturally gifted, finally stood up during one of Richards' toxic rants. "Shut up, Richards. Peterson said quietly but firmly, "We're all here because we chose to be here. We're all fighting the same fight. If you want to quit, quit. But stop trying to take the rest of us with you." The room went silent. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Richards tried to escalate the confrontation, but something had shifted. Other trainees began supporting Peterson. They formed a wall of solidarity that made Richards' bullying ineffective. Within days, Richards rang the bell and left training. But the impact of Peterson's stand went far beyond removing one toxic individual. The entire class became stronger, more unified, and more resilient. They had learned that they could face internal threats as effectively as external challenges. Peterson went on to become a decorated SEAL who served in multiple combat deployments. Years later, he would say that standing up to Richards was more important than any physical challenge he faced during training. "I learned that courage isn't just about facing enemy fire," Peterson reflects. "Sometimes courage is about facing the person in your own foxhole who's trying to convince you to surrender." This lesson extends far beyond military training. In every area of life, you will encounter bullies who try to diminish your dreams, undermine your confidence, and sabotage your progress. Consider Sarah, a young marketing professional working at a prestigious advertising agency. She was talented, hardworking, and passionate about creating campaigns that would make a real difference. But there was one senior colleague, let's call him Marcus, who seemed determined to crush her spirit. Marcus would publicly criticize Sarah's ideas in meetings, claiming they were naive or impractical. He would take credit for her contributions while simultaneously undermining her reputation with supervisors. He would spread rumors about her capabilities and question whether she was really cut out for this industry. For months, Sarah tried to avoid confrontation. She worked harder, stayed later, and tried to prove herself through performance alone. But Marcus's bullying continued and even escalated. Sarah began to doubt herself, second-guess her ideas, and consider leaving the industry entirely. Then Sarah remembered something her father had taught her. Bullies only have as much power as you give them. At the next team meeting, when Marcus began his usual pattern of publicly demolishing her ideas, Sarah did something that shocked everyone, including herself. She stood up calmly and said, "Marcus, I notice you have strong opinions about my ideas. I'd love to hear your specific suggestions for improvement rather than just criticism. What exactly would you do differently, and how would you measure success?" The room went silent. Marcus, caught off guard by the direct but professional challenge, stumbled through a vague response that revealed he hadn't actually thought through alternatives. Sarah continued, "I appreciate feedback that helps our campaign succeed, but I need constructive input, not destructive commentary. Can we agree to focus on solutions rather than just problems?" The dynamic shifted immediately. Marcus's bullying lost its power because Sarah had exposed it for what it was, empty negativity without substance. Other team members began supporting Sarah's approach. Within weeks, Marcus either modified his behavior or found himself isolated from the team's collaborative energy. More importantly, Sarah discovered something about herself. She was stronger than she had realized, and standing up for herself actually improved her performance rather than creating more problems. 2 years later, Sarah was promoted to creative director, while Marcus remained in his same position, known throughout the company as someone who talked a lot but contributed little. But McRaven's lesson about standing up to bullies goes deeper than just workplace dynamics or interpersonal conflicts. Sometimes the biggest bully you'll face is the voice inside your own head. Consider the internal bully that tells you, you're not smart enough to pursue that dream. You don't have what it takes to start that business. You're too old to make a significant change. You don't deserve that level of success. You should just accept limitations and stop trying so hard. This internal bully is often more destructive than any external critic because it has 24/7 access to your thoughts and knows exactly which insecurities to target. Building intensity. The same principles that work against external bullies work against internal bullies. Confront directly. Don't let negative self-talk go unchallenged. When you catch yourself thinking, "I can't do this," immediately respond with what evidence supports that belief and what evidence contradicts it. Demand specifics. When your inner critic says you're not good enough, ask, "Good enough for what? According to whom?" Based on what standards? Build alliances. Surround yourself with people who believe in your potential and can counteract negative internal messaging. Focus on solutions. Instead of dwelling on problems, channel energy into actionable steps that create progress. McRaven learned this lesson not just in training, but throughout his military career and civilian leadership roles. He discovered that bullies, whether external or internal, operate from the same playbook. They identify insecurities, amplify fears, and try to convince you that their limitations should become your limitations. But here's what bullies don't want you to know. They're usually the most insecure people in the room, projecting their own fears and inadequacies onto others. The trainee Richards wasn't really trying to help his classmates avoid failure. He was trying to avoid being the only one who failed. The colleague Marcus wasn't really trying to improve Sarah's work. He was trying to diminish her success. So his mediocrity wouldn't be as obvious. The internal critic isn't really protecting you from disappointment. It's protecting you from the risk of discovering how capable you actually are. Here's your challenge, and it's not optional if you want to change your world. Identify the bullies in your life, both external and internal. Who is telling you that your dreams are impossible? Who is convincing you to play smaller than your potential? What voices are you listening to that serve their agenda rather than your growth? Stand up with courage and clarity. You don't have to be aggressive or confrontational, but you do have to be firm and consistent. Set boundaries. Demand respect. Challenge negative messaging with evidence and action. Build your support network. Surround yourself with people who believe in your potential and will stand with you when bullies try to tear you down. Remember Peterson, the SEAL trainee who stood up to Richards? 20 years later, he was asked what he would tell his younger self about that moment. His answer was profound. I would tell him that standing up to that bully wasn't just about stopping one person's negative behavior. It was about proving to myself that I had the courage to fight for what mattered. Every challenge I faced after that, in combat, in leadership, in life, was easier because I knew I could stand up to whatever tried to tear me down. The bully standing between you and your dreams might be a person, a system, a circumstance, or a voice in your head. But regardless of the source, the solution is the same. Stand up, speak up, don't back down. Your dreams are worth fighting for. Your potential is worth defending. Your future is worth protecting. The bullies are counting on your silence, your compliance, your surrender. Disappoint them. Stand up. Lesson 8. Rise to the occasion. If you want to change the world, step up when the times are toughest. There's a moment in every person's life when everything they've ever learned, every skill they developed, every ounce of character they built, gets tested in the crucible of crisis. It's the moment when ordinary people have the opportunity to become extraordinary, not because they're naturally gifted, but because they choose to rise when others fall. Admiral McRaven learned this lesson during the darkest hours of Navy SEAL training, but would define his entire approach to leadership and life. Picture the scene. It's 2 a.m. during Hell Week. Trainees have been awake for over 60 hours straight. Their bodies are broken, their minds are fractured, and their spirits are crushed. The instructors have just announced another impossible challenge, a timed ocean swim in near-freezing water with full gear. Most of the remaining trainees are barely functioning. They're stumbling, mumbling, and operating on pure survival instinct. The natural response is to do the minimum required to avoid elimination, to conserve energy, avoid drawing attention, and hope someone else steps up to lead. But this is exactly when future SEALs reveal themselves. In McRaven's class, there was a trainee named Rodriguez who was struggling just as much as everyone else. He was cold, exhausted, and operating on fumes. But when the instructors asked for a volunteer to lead the swim formation, Rodriguez raised his hand. "I'll take point," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with determination. For the next hour, Rodriguez set the pace, called out navigation markers, and encouraged his teammates when they wanted to quit. He didn't do this because he felt strong. He did it because the team needed someone to be strong. That moment changed Rodriguez's trajectory forever. The instructors noted his willingness to lead when leadership was hardest. His classmates remembered his courage when courage was most needed. Most importantly, Rodriguez proved to himself that he could rise to any occasion, regardless of circumstances. Years later, during a combat mission in Iraq, Rodriguez would draw on that same well of strength when his unit was ambushed and pinned down. While others were paralyzed by the chaos, Rodriguez rallied his team, coordinated the defense, and led them to safety. The leadership he had shown during that midnight swim had prepared him for the moment when lives depended on his ability to rise to the occasion. This principle isn't limited to military combat or extreme training. Every day, in every field, in every community, there are moments when ordinary people have the opportunity to become extraordinary by choosing to step up when others step back. Consider Maria, a night shift nurse in a busy emergency room. It was March 2020, the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, when hospitals were overwhelmed, protocols were constantly changing, and fear was rampant among medical staff. Many of Maria's colleagues were calling in sick, requesting transfers, or finding reasons to avoid the most challenging cases. The emergency room was understaffed, overcrowded, and operating in crisis mode. Patients were scared, families were panicked, and even experienced doctors seemed overwhelmed by the unprecedented situation. Maria could have done the minimum required to get through her shifts. She could have focused solely on her assigned patients and avoided taking on additional responsibilities. She could have waited for someone else to provide leadership and guidance. Instead, she chose to rise to the occasion. Maria began arriving early to help prepare for each shift. She volunteered for the most challenging cases that other nurses wanted to avoid. She created informal support groups for newer nurses who were struggling with the stress. She developed systems for patient communication that helped families stay connected with their loved ones despite visitor restrictions. Most importantly, she maintained a calm, confident presence that reassured both patients and colleagues during the darkest moments of the crisis. Maria's willingness to step up didn't go unnoticed. Hospital administrators saw her natural leadership abilities. Colleagues began looking to her for guidance and support. Patients and families specifically requested her care. Within 18 months, Maria was promoted to charge nurse. Within 3 years, she became the director of emergency services. Her willingness to rise to the occasion during a crisis had revealed leadership capabilities she didn't even know she possessed. The pandemic was terrible, Maria reflects, but it showed me who I really was. When everything fell apart, I discovered that I was someone who could help put it back together. That knowledge changed everything about how I see myself and my capabilities. This is the transformative power of rising to the occasion. It doesn't just solve immediate problems. It reveals your true potential and builds unshakable confidence for future challenges. McRaven observed this pattern throughout his military career. The officers who became legends weren't necessarily the most talented or naturally gifted. They were the ones who stepped forward when situations were most desperate, when leadership was most needed, when others were most likely to retreat. Consider these historical examples. Winston Churchill became Britain's prime minister not during peacetime prosperity, but during World War II when the nation faced its darkest hour. His willingness to rise to the occasion saved not just Britain, but potentially all of Western civilization. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't become a civil rights leader during easy times. He stepped forward during the most dangerous period of the movement, when leadership meant risking everything for principles that mattered more than personal safety. Malala Yousafzai didn't become a global advocate for education when it was safe and popular. She rose to the occasion when speaking up meant facing death threats from the Taliban. None of these people felt ready for the challenges they faced. None of them had perfect preparation or ideal circumstances. They rose to the occasion not because they felt capable, but because the occasion demanded someone to rise. This is the secret that separates those who change the world from those who watch the world change. They understand that greatness isn't about feeling ready. It's about acting ready even when you don't feel ready. But rising to the occasion doesn't require historical significance or global recognition. Every day, there are small opportunities to step up that can transform your life and the lives of others. The meeting where everyone is confused and you volunteer to clarify the objectives. The project where everyone is overwhelmed and you offer to coordinate the effort. The family crisis where everyone is panicking and you become the voice of calm reason. The community problem where everyone is complaining and you organize a solution. Here's what McRaven learned from decades of observing people under pressure. The ones who rise to the occasion aren't fearless. They're faithful. Faithful to their values. Faithful to their team. Faithful to their mission. They don't step up because they're not afraid. They step up despite being afraid, because something matters more than their fear. Rodriguez, the SEAL trainee who volunteered to lead that midnight swim, later admitted that he was terrified. "I was as scared and exhausted as everyone else," he said. "But I realized that someone had to lead, and if it wasn't going to be me, then who? If not now, when?" That's the question that separates those who rise from those who hide. If not me, who? If not now, when? Your moment is coming. Maybe it's already here. Somewhere in your life, there's a situation that needs someone to step up, speak up, and lead the way forward. Others are waiting for someone else to take the first step. You can wait for perfect conditions, perfect preparation, perfect confidence. Or you can understand what every great leader has learned. Perfect conditions don't create great leaders. Great leaders create perfect conditions by rising to imperfect occasions. The world doesn't need you to be perfect. The world needs you to be present when presence matters most. Your team doesn't need you to have all the answers. Your team needs you to ask the right questions when everyone else is paralyzed by confusion. Your community doesn't need you to be fearless. Your community needs you to be faithful to what matters when fear tries to paralyze everyone. The occasion is waiting. The moment is here. The question is simple. Will you rise? Lesson 9. Give people hope. If you want to change the world, be someone's angel. In the depths of human suffering, when all seems lost and darkness threatens to consume everything, there's a moment when a single person can change the trajectory of despair simply by refusing to let hope die. Admiral McRaven learned this lesson during the most brutal phase of Navy SEAL training, but it would become the foundation of his leadership philosophy for the rest of his life. Let me take you to a moment that reveals the true power of hope. It's the middle of Hell Week, day 4 of 5.5 days of continuous training with minimal sleep. Trainees have been in and out of the freezing Pacific Ocean dozens of times. Their core body temperatures are dangerously low, their minds are hallucinating from exhaustion, and their spirits are completely broken. This is when many trainees make the decision to quit. They've reached their absolute limit, and the bell that ends their suffering is only a few steps away. The instructors know this, and they exploit it with psychological warfare, designed to push people past their breaking point. In McRaven's class, there was a moment when it seemed like half the remaining trainees were ready to quit simultaneously. The cascade effect was beginning. When one person rings the bell, it often triggers others to follow. The instructors were circling like sharks, sensing weakness and ready to capitalize on the mass exodus they had seen in previous classes. Then something extraordinary happened. A trainee named Williams, who was suffering just as much as everyone else, began moving to the group of broken, shivering warriors. He wasn't giving speeches or trying to be a motivational speaker. He was simply being present with people who were at their lowest point. To one trainee who was staring at the bell, Williams whispered, "You've made it this far. Just make it one more hour." To another who was crying from exhaustion, he said, "Your family is going to be so proud when you graduate. Don't rob them of that moment." To a third who was convinced he wasn't strong enough, Williams simply said, "You're stronger than you know. I've been watching you, and you're inspiring me to keep going." Williams wasn't lying or offering false encouragement. He was genuinely suffering himself, but he had made a conscious choice to focus on lifting others rather than dwelling on his own pain. He became what McRaven calls an angel, someone who appears in your darkest moment to remind you that hope still exists. The impact was immediate and profound. Instead of a mass exodus, the class rallied. Trainees who had been ready to quit found renewed strength. The cascade effect reversed. Instead of despair spreading, hope began to multiply. Not a single person quit that day. Williams went on to become a decorated SEAL who served multiple combat deployments. But years later, when asked about his proudest moment in the military, he didn't talk about successful missions or commendations. He talked about that day during Hell Week when he chose to be someone's angel. "I realize that leadership isn't about being the strongest person in the room," Williams reflects. "Sometimes leadership is about helping others find strength they didn't know they had. When you give people hope, you don't just change their day, you change their belief about what's possible." This lesson extends far beyond military training. In every area of life, there are moments when your choice to offer hope rather than join in despair can literally save someone's future. Consider the story of David, a high school math teacher in an underfunded urban school district. His students faced challenges that would overwhelm most adults: poverty, family instability, community violence, and a school system that seemed designed for failure rather than success. Most of David's colleagues have become cynical after years of watching talented students drop out, get arrested, or simply disappear from the education system. Staff meetings were exercises in complaint and resignation. The prevailing attitude was, we can't save them all, so why try to save any? David could have adopted the same mindset. The statistical reality was that most of his students would not go to college. Many would not even graduate high school. It would have been easy to just teach the curriculum, collect his paycheck, and accept that some situations are beyond help. Instead, David chose to be an angel. David began staying after school to provide free tutoring for any student who wanted it. He started a scholarship fund by contributing part of his own salary and fundraising in the community. He made home visits to talk with parents about their children's potential. Most importantly, he refused to let his students accept limitations as permanent conditions. To Maria, who was convinced she was bad at math, David said, "You're not bad at math. You just haven't found the right way to learn it yet. Let's find your way." To Jerome, who was planning to drop out at 16, David said, "You have a brilliant mind. The world needs what you have to offer. Don't deprive us of your gifts." To Ashley, who believed college was for other people, David said, "College is for people who are willing to work for their dreams. I see that willingness in you every day." The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. Students who had been written off by the system began believing in themselves. Test scores improved. Graduation rates increased. Most remarkably, David's hopeless students began getting accepted to colleges and universities. Over his 15-year career, David has seen over 200 of his students graduate from college. Students whose statistics said would never make it past high school. When local media asked about his secret formula, David's answer was simple: "I don't have a secret formula. I just refuse to let my students give up hope. When they can't see their potential, I see it for them until they can see it for themselves." This is a profound truth that McRaven discovered. Hope is not just an emotion. It's a strategy. It's a conscious choice to focus on possibilities rather than limitations, solutions rather than problems, potential rather than current circumstances. But giving people hope doesn't mean offering false promises or ignoring real challenges. True hope is based on truth, not fantasy. It acknowledges current difficulties while maintaining faith in future possibilities. Consider these elements of authentic hope. Presence over preaching. Sometimes the most hopeful thing you could do is simply show up when others have given up. Your presence communicates that the person matters enough for you to invest your time and attention. Belief over judgment. Instead of focusing on what's wrong with someone's current situation, focus on what's possible in their future. See potential that they can't see themselves. Action over sympathy. Hope without action is just wishful thinking. True angels don't just offer encouragement. They provide practical support, resources, and pathways forward. Persistence over convenience. Being someone's angel often requires showing up repeatedly, especially when it's inconvenient and the person isn't immediately responsive. McRaven shares a story from his time as a young officer when he encountered a fellow soldier who was struggling with depression and had begun drinking heavily. Other officers avoided this soldier, viewing him as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be helped. McRaven made a different choice. He began having regular coffee meetings with this soldier, not to lecture or counsel, but simply to listen and remind him that someone cared about his well-being. He helped the soldier get professional counseling and supported him through the recovery process. That soldier went on to have a distinguished military career and later became a successful business leader. 20 years later, he sent McRaven a letter that said, "You saved my life by refusing to give up on me when I had given up on myself. You were my angel during the darkest period of my life." This is a multiplying power of hope. When you refuse to let someone give up, you don't just change their trajectory. You change the trajectory of everyone they will eventually influence. The student you encourage becomes a teacher who inspires hundreds of others. The colleague you support becomes a leader who transforms entire organizations. The friend you believe in becomes the person who believes in others when they need it most. Here's your challenge, and it's both simple and profound. Look around your life right now. Who needs an angel? Who is struggling with circumstances that seem insurmountable? Who has started to believe that their situation is hopeless? It might be a colleague who is overwhelmed by work challenges, a family member who is facing health issues, a friend who is going through a difficult divorce, a neighbor who is struggling financially, a student who doesn't believe in their own potential, a teammate who is ready to quit pursuing their dreams. You don't need special training to be someone's angel. You don't need perfect circumstances or unlimited resources. You just need to make a conscious choice to offer hope instead of adding to despair. Sometimes being an angel means offering practical help. Sometimes it means providing emotional support. Sometimes it just means showing up consistently and refusing to let someone face their challenges alone. Remember Williams, the SEAL trainee who moved through his suffering classmates offering words of hope? He later said, "I didn't feel like I had anything to give that day. I was as broken as everyone else. But I realized that sometimes the best gift you can give someone is a reminder that they're not alone in their struggle." That's the beautiful paradox of hope. You don't have to feel hopeful to give hope. You just have to choose to focus on what's possible rather than what's impossible. The world is full of people who are one conversation away from giving up on their dreams, one disappointment away from accepting defeat, one setback away from believing they don't matter. You have the power to change that trajectory with a single choice, the choice to be someone's angel. The question isn't whether you're qualified to give hope. The question is whether you're willing to refuse to let hope die. Be someone's angel. The world needs more of them. Lesson 10. Never ever quit. If you want to change the world, never ever ring the bell. In the center of a Navy SEAL training compound stands a brass bell. It's not decorative. It's not ceremonial. It's an escape route for anyone who decides they can't handle the pressure, the pain, the seemingly impossible demands of becoming a SEAL. All you have to do is ring it 3 times, and your suffering ends immediately. You get warm clothes, hot food, and a comfortable ride away from the hell you've been enduring. The instructors will even be kind to you. No shame, no judgment, just understanding that not everyone is cut out for this level of challenge. The bell is always there, waiting during the coldest ocean swims, when hypothermia threatens your life, during the longest runs, when your legs refuse to carry you another step, during the mental challenges, when your mind begins to fracture from exhaustion and stress. Ring the bell and it all stops. Admiral McRaven watched hundreds of trainees over the years, and he noticed something that would fundamentally change how he understood human potential. The difference between those who became SEALs and those who didn't wasn't usually physical strength, natural talent, or even intelligence. The difference was the absolute refusal to ring the bell, no matter what. Let me tell you about Johnson, a trainee who, by every measurable standard, should have quit. Johnson was smaller than most of his classmates. His initial physical fitness scores were in the bottom third of the class. He struggled with swimming tests, failed multiple obstacle course attempts, and was regularly selected for extra punishment training. During Hell Week, Johnson developed pneumonia. His body temperature spiked to dangerous levels. His breathing became labored, and medical staff recommended he be removed from training for his own safety. Johnson refused. "I didn't come this far quit because I'm sick," he told a medical officer. "I came to become a SEAL. SEALs don't quit because things get uncomfortable." The instructors allowed Johnson to continue, but they watched him closely, expecting him to ring the bell as his condition worsened. During the midnight ocean swims, while other trainees were merely cold, Johnson was battling both hypothermia and respiratory distress. During the long runs, while others were fighting fatigue, Johnson was fighting to breathe. But Johnson never approached the bell. Not once. Instead, something remarkable happened. His pneumonia began to resolve, not despite the training, but seemingly because of his mental refusal to accept defeat. His body, following the lead of his unbreakable will, found resources it didn't know it possessed. Johnson not only graduated from SEAL training, he graduated at the top of his class. He went on to serve in some of the most dangerous special operations missions in modern military history. When asked about his secret, Johnson's answer was simple. I never considered ringing the bell to be an option. When quitting isn't a choice, you find ways to succeed that you never knew existed. This principle, the absolute refusal to quit, extends far beyond military training. It's the common thread that connects every extraordinary achievement in human history. Consider the story of Sarah, a single mother who decided to become a doctor at age 35. She had no college degree, no money for medical school, and no support system to help with child care during years of intensive study. Everyone told Sarah her dream was unrealistic. Her family said she was too old to start over. Financial advisors said medical school was too expensive for someone in her situation. Academic counselors said the competition was too fierce for someone without a traditional background. Sarah could have listened to the voices telling her to quit before she started. She could have chosen a more practical career path. She could have accepted that some dreams are only for other people. Instead, Sarah made a decision that changed everything. She removed quitting from her list of options. Sarah enrolled in community college while working full-time as a waitress. She studied during her breaks, after her daughter went to bed, and during every spare moment she could find. When she couldn't afford textbooks, she checked them out from the library. When she couldn't afford childcare, she brought her daughter to study groups. It took Sarah 3 years to complete her undergraduate degree. Then came the MCAT preparation, while working multiple jobs. Then came medical school applications and rejections, lots of rejections. Sarah was rejected by 47 medical schools before being accepted by the 48th. During medical school, she struggled academically and financially. She considered quitting dozens of times, especially during her surgical rotation when a supervising physician told her she didn't have what it takes and should consider a different specialty. But Sarah had learned something that Johnson the SEAL understood. When you remove quitting as an option, you discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. 8 years after starting her journey, Dr. Sarah graduated medical school and was accepted into a competitive residency program. Today, she's a successful emergency room physician who specializes in treating low-income patients who remind her of her former self. People ask me how I found the strength to keep going. Sarah reflects. The truth is, I didn't have to find strength. I just had to refuse to find excuses. When giving up is an option, moving forward becomes the only choice. This is a profound truth that McRaven discovered through decades of observing human performance under extreme pressure. Your capacity for endurance, achievement, and transformation is virtually unlimited, but only if you remove the option of quitting. The bell isn't just a physical object in SEAL training. The bell represents every moment in your life when you have the choice between persistence and surrender, between temporary discomfort and permanent regret, between what you are and what you could become. Consider the bells in your own life. The business idea you abandoned after the first setback. The relationship you gave up on when it required effort to maintain. The fitness goal you quit when results didn't come fast enough. The skill you stopped developing when it became challenging. The dream you surrendered when others said it was impossible. McRaven's insight is that quitting is rarely about circumstances. It's about mindset. The trainees who rang the bell during SEAL training didn't quit because the challenges were impossible. They quit because they allowed themselves to believe that quitting was an acceptable option. The trainees who became SEALs faced the exact same challenges, the exact same pain, the exact same impossible circumstances. The difference was their relationship with the possibility of surrender. But here's what's crucial to understand. Never quitting doesn't mean never adapting. It doesn't mean stubbornly pursuing the same failed approach indefinitely. It means never quitting on your commitment to find a way forward, even if that way looks different than you originally planned. Johnson the SEAL didn't quit training, but he did adapt his techniques to accommodate his physical limitations. Sarah didn't quit her dream of becoming a doctor, but she did modify her timeline and approach based on her circumstances. The difference between adaptation and quitting is this. Adaptation changes your methods while maintaining your mission. Quitting abandons a mission entirely. Winners adapt. Quitters abandon. So here's your final challenge, the one that will determine whether you become someone who changes the world or someone who watches others change it. Remove the bell from your life. Stop treating quitting as an acceptable option for the things that truly matter to you. Stop giving yourself permission to surrender when circumstances become difficult. Stop allowing temporary setbacks to become permanent defeats. This doesn't mean every goal is achievable exactly as you envision it, but it means that if something matters enough to pursue, it matters enough to persist through the inevitable challenges that will test your commitment. When you remove quitting as an option, 3 things happen. 1. You discover resources you didn't know you had, like Johnson finding strength despite pneumonia, or Sarah finding time despite overwhelming responsibilities. 2. You develop creative solutions you wouldn't have considered. When an easy path is blocked, you find paths that others can't see. 3. You build unshakable confidence for future challenges. Once you prove to yourself that you don't quit, every subsequent challenge becomes easier to face. The bell is always there, whispering its seductive promise of immediate relief from discomfort. It represents every voice that tells you to accept limitations, every circumstance that suggests surrender, every moment when giving up feels easier than moving forward. But you now know something that separates you from the majority of people who will hear this message. You know that extraordinary achievements require the extraordinary choice to never, ever ring the bell. Your dreams are on the other side of your refusal to quit. Your potential is hidden behind your commitment to persist. Your greatest victories are waiting beyond your willingness to endure temporary defeat. The bell is there. It will always be there. Your choice is simple. Will you ring it, or will you become the person who refuses to let circumstances define your destiny? Never, ever ring the bell. Your world-changing life depends on it. Closing, the power to change the world. As we reach the end of this journey through Admiral McRaven's life-changing wisdom, I want you to pause for a moment and consider where you were when we started versus where you are right now. 42 minutes ago, you might have thought that change in the world required extraordinary circumstances, exceptional talents, or perfect conditions. Now you know something different. Now you know that change in the world begins with something as simple as making your bed. Every lesson we've explored today connects to a single, profound truth. Extraordinary results come from ordinary people who make the disciplined choice to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, especially when they don't feel like doing it. Make your bed, because small wins create unstoppable momentum. Find someone to help you paddle, because multiplication happens through collaboration. Measure people by the size of their heart, because character matters more than credentials. Accept that life's not fair and drive on, because your response to unfairness defines your destiny. Don't be afraid of the circus, because failure is just expensive education. Slide down the obstacle head first, because intelligent risks create extraordinary rewards. Stand up to the bullies, because courage is contagious. Rise to the occasion, because greatness emerges when it's needed most. Be someone's angel, because hope is the most powerful gift you can give. Never, ever ring the bell, because persistence is the ultimate predictor of success. These aren't just lessons from military training. These are principles that work in boardrooms and classrooms, in relationships and personal challenges, in moments of crisis and opportunities for growth. You now have a choice to make. You can treat this as interesting information that you consumed and then forgot, or you can treat this as a blueprint for a transformation that starts the moment you leave your bedroom tomorrow morning. I challenge you to start with just one lesson. Pick the one that resonated most deeply with your current situation. Maybe it's making your bed because you need momentum. Maybe it's standing up to bullies because you've been accepting treatment you don't deserve. Maybe it's never ringing the bell because you've been quitting too easily on things that matter. Start there. Master that. Let it transform that area of your life. Then add another lesson. And another. Because here's what Admiral McRaven learned from a lifetime of serving alongside the world's most elite warriors. You don't have to be perfect to make a difference. You don't have to be fearless to be courageous. You don't have to be the strongest person in the room to be the one who changes everything. You just have to be willing to start small, stay consistent, and never give up on becoming the person the world needs you to be. Your bed is waiting for you tomorrow morning. Your team is waiting for someone to help paddle. Your moment to rise to the occasion is coming. Your opportunity to be someone's angel is here. The question isn't whether you can change the world. The question is whether you will. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Make Your Bed by Admiral William H. McRaven. If this message has inspired you to take action, subscribe to Mind's Quotes for more life-changing wisdom that will help you become the extraordinary person you were meant to be. Remember, it all starts with making your bed. What will you make of your life?